I have stepped into the 1990s with a CD player. This CD player actually has quite the story behind it. This was my father's first CD, first CD player in our whole house. My father bought this in, I think, February of 1989. I still have the paperwork. And a friend of his, that guy's girlfriend, worked at the mall where this shop was. And so he convinced her, if I give you the money, will you go buy it? Which she did. She picked it up. We got a service plan on it, which is very rare. Back then, nobody knew what CD players were going to need service-wise in '89. And my dad brought it home, and his stereo rack, I remember he had the turntable on top. He had a cassette deck. He had the receiver then, and then he had an empty slot for cassettes, just for storage. Then he had the cassette deck. And so I remember I came home. I got a piece of cake for snack after school, which was a Friday, because the previous night, Thursday, we'd been at Cub Scouts, and they had the... what is it called? The blue and gold banquet. And then they had a cake auction at the end. So I was eating this cake from the cake auction. I sat down in front of the TV with my back against our easy chair. And the TV was right next to the stereo set. And I looked up and all of a sudden I was like, oh my gosh. I realized, and I couldn't talk. I was like, I was so excited. So my dad went in the other room. He had gone to the library earlier that day and gotten 6 Beatles CDs. He worked half days on Fridays back then. He got 6 Beatles CDs. So we listened to those, and it was super exciting. So this, and my brother, when he came home, I was really excited for him to see it. And we were waiting, and he never noticed. I think he was just staring at the TV, and he wasn't into technical stuff as much as I am. So this was our first CD player. This served us well from '89 to '98. And as you can see, it had a few novel features. It had a volume control for the headphone jack, which was great. It had a digital out, which is on the back, a RCA-style digital out, which... you could feed a DA converter, that sort of thing, a DAT deck. That's come in useful in the years since. And it had over here, it had something, the side AB, so if you were making a tape off a CD, it would calculate where you needed to split it, the songs. It also had auto peak. It would go through the whole CD and find the loudest point so you could adjust your audio level accordingly. Neither of those features was super useful in retrospect, but it was nice to have. You could program it, so you could program any tracks you wanted in any order. I don't remember what edit did, or recall. Clear, I think, would just dump out what you had programmed. AB would take a certain section, just play it over and over again. And, of course, you could enter in whatever track you wanted. It had a remote, which I've got to put away because we kept it in the plastic it came in the box, and we've never taken it out. So, untouched by human hands. But the CD player sounded great, and every 5 years or so, it seems like, I pull this thing out of storage, hook it up for some reason, and it still sounds great, even without an external DA converter. So whatever they did in 1989 with the technology to make it sound good, it worked. And really, it shouldn't have, because if you look back at early digital technology from the 80s and 90s, it did not sound great. But this one, for whatever reason, they got it right. Just after this model, this is the SL-P350, all the models after this, they started having what Technics called 1-bit oversampling, or MASH was the name for it. And that was on almost all their players after this. So this was the last one not to have that. And even though that later technology was supposed to be good, at this time, the name of the game was oversampling. 16 times oversampling. Well, 4 is actually pretty low, if memory serves. But it did its job, and it sounded good. And I've never really been big into CDs, aside from using them in the car. So to me, it doesn't matter as much. But the other thing about this CD player, I'll say, we replaced this in 1998 with a 5-disc changer, also a Technics, which did not, by the way, have a digital out. So that shows you how things went backwards. Didn't have a headphone jack with volume control, so that was annoying. And that was not a bad player. It served us for a few years, and we just sold it because we weren't into it. But this one, for whatever reason, has held on, and it's done excellently. And also, if you hit stop, and I'll show you. Oh, I was listening to Santana. This tray, and you can't really tell. Oh, it's a bit dusty. I should probably clean this off before I put it back into service. This is metal. Well, it's plastic and metal. After this, they would all be plastic. Everything got plastic. So I feel like this was really the last hurrah that we got in before CD players took a major nosedive in quality. As far as non-high-end, you could still, after this, buy CD players that were $3,000 and made of metal and had all sorts of features. But this was it when it came to mass market electronics, that they were still trying to put their best foot forward and make everything well built and sound good.